this is Christina Barton watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about this big announcement that President Trump, former President Trump, perhaps future President Trump, gave about some pro-life policies. And he put out a post the other night, I guess it was last night, about this announcement, and people were speculating, and I was thinking all the worst things possible, I guess, based on other things that he had said. The statement wasn't as controversial as I thought it would be, but there's some things I want to point out about it. And some major pro-life organization leaders are TO'd with Trump and are saying he is not pro-life. And some people are like, he made the things that he said are the only things that could have been said to win. And I kind of think he could have left it alone, but we'll watch his statement and go through it. Oh, that's sweet. Someone said, I was just listening to this thing, excited for your take. I appreciate that. So we'll also be talking a little bit about Michael Knowles' interview with Nala. I don't have a bunch of clips and stuff to pull up, but I just want to talk about that a bit. I made a post about it on YouTube, which she's a OnlyFans girl who left the business, deleted her account, by the way, and has decided to turn her life over to God. And so Pearly Things, doesn't believe it, and a lot of people don't buy it. And who are you? I hate kind of saying, who are you to judge? People throw that around, but to judge someone's salvation, like if they're blatantly like doing something that is like, that's really not Christian, then I think you can be like, and the person in the scenario who I see is doing things that are like explicitly not Christian is Pearl Davis. So I have lots of thoughts about that. I have thoughts about the Fresh and Fit guys abortion pressure situation that happened. I'm not going to be able to get to that today. I'll probably get to it tomorrow. That happened, while I was kind of off on my vacation. So I got to talk about that, but I'll probably get to that tomorrow. And I wanted to talk about this clip from Joe Rogan talking about the Israel-Gaza war. But that'll be at the tail end. We'll see if we have time to get to it, because we are going to watch the whole Trump video together. But before we jump into it, I want to say I hope you guys did not burn your eyeballs during the eclipse. I hope you guys did not stare directly into the sun and permanently ruin your vision. I don't know if you can permanently ruin your vision, but I did hear about this girl who did stare up into the sun a couple years ago, the same year that Trump was staring up into the eclipse, and really damaged her vision. So again, I hope you guys, your vision is fine today. And you got to see a little bit of the eclipse. We didn't, where I'm at, we weren't in the path where we could see like a total eclipse, but definitely could see something going on. So like when outside it's dark, and at the last second I was rushing to see if anybody had any glasses that were really close, and I couldn't find any. So I was like, okay, so I just kind of like had my phone and the screen like in the car with the sunroof, so the screen and then my phone. So I'm like, because I had briefly looked up into the sky, and I'm like, gosh, that was bright and a mistake. But I hope your eyes are fine. And I did take a brief break for a couple days to focus on a book. It wasn't one of my political books. It was a fiction book. I was trying really hard to get it done. In case you're wondering, I didn't, but I got a lot of it written, and I needed that time. So I appreciate your patience, guys. I really do. So anyway, before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. Which I have a lot of content that I can go back to, like that I posted like on Twitter and just different conversations. Like I saw someone refer to a baby as like a rapist baby, and I'm like, why is it that they only call it a baby when it's the rapist? So you guys like notice that people do that. It's a fetus if you're having a normal conversation. But if they're talking about a rape baby, it's a rape baby. And so I wrote an article about that before. I also wrote an article about the force, when people are like, you're forcing people to have babies. I've written about things like that. So I encourage you guys to go check out different stuff on the website if you haven't read, articles that are there. Check out different merch that's available on the website. We got some cool merch there. And if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the website. It does cost to stream and run my website, all that stuff, so you guys can support. I appreciate it. I got a question. I got to work. Oh gosh. Sit. Yeah, gotta work on that book, or your nephew might have something to say if you take too long. Well, you know what? He's taking his sweet time reading Super Kids, so he has no right to speak. But actually, I wasn't even working on the Super Kid book; it was another book. So, but yeah. For those of you a little lost, my nephew was dissing me because I didn't have more Super Kid books written, and he's like, if you wrote, because I wrote it before he was born, and he's about 7, 8. I think he'll be 8 this year. And he's just like, shouldn't you have more done by now? And I'm like, I've written a lot of books, Daniel. I'm like, most people are impressed when you tell them you wrote over 30 books, but this kid does not give you any sort of props. He doesn't. So anyway, let's actually get to the content of the day. So last night I saw this post from Trump about this announcement, and there's a lot of speculation about it, and I speculated a lot. Now, Trump has made a lot of comments. He's dissed 6-week bans, and that infuriated me. Really, really upset me. I think I would, ever since the midterm, he's had this like slight against the pro-life community, and he's seen that as like a big negative, as that's what's pulling down the elections. No talk about some of his picks, including some of his picks who were very pro-life and didn't support any sort of exceptions. So no sort of accountability there on that front from him, but he very much wanted to focus on, hey, you guys are getting killed in the pro-life community. They fought so hard. Now they're dropping the ball. What's that about? So he was in different interviews and gave the very strong impression that he wanted to compromise, and it would be possible to get like a 15-week compromise or something like that. That he wouldn't commit to what week he was talking about. In the past, he said things like 21 weeks, 20 weeks. And so I didn't know how far he was going to go to make a compromise. I'm like, if you really think you're going to do a compromise and the Democrats are going to come to the table, which they're not, it would only make sense to have a compromise for them if it was something like 20 weeks with a lot of exceptions, like a health exception that is so broad, so incredibly broad, that it basically makes it okay to have any sort of abortion possible. So I didn't know what this man was going to do, but a lot of people last night were speculating that when he dropped his announcement that he was going to do 15 weeks. So let me just go ahead and show you the announcement so I can tell you why people are flipping out, because I had some tweets last night myself. I will be putting out my statement on abortion and abortion rights tomorrow morning. Republicans and all others must follow their hearts and minds. But remember that, like Ronald Reagan before me, I and most other Republicans believe in exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. Great love and compassion must be shown when even thinking about the subject of life. But at the same time, we must use common sense and realizing that we have an obligation to the salvation of our nation, which is currently in serious decline, to win elections, without which we will have nothing other than failure, death, and destruction. We will not let that happen. We will make America great again. So people were zoning in on this line about abortion rights and saying, what does that mean? We don't acknowledge a right to abortion. So what does this mean? Why would you write this down? Who wrote this? Was it? And if it was you, it was bad, and you need to have someone kind of look over this. But what do you mean by abortion rights? So that was a big red flag. The you must go with your heart, and he's talking about the exceptions. And I just had no idea how far he was going to go, and everyone was anticipating and prepping for him saying something like, we're going to have a 15 ban or something. So if there was a 15 abortion week ban, which not most people, but I think a lot of people are like, you know what, that sounds like that could work, a 15. If it was 15 weeks, that would encompass about 94% of abortions. So 94% of those. And then like rape, incest, life of the mother is like a percentage. So if there was a 15-week compromise, you would at least allow like 95% of abortions to occur. So if there's like about 1 million abortions every year and we still allow like 95% of them to happen, is that really a less monstrous position than the Democrats saying, well, they won't say, but in not so many words, no restrictions up until the moment of birth. So, which I don't think we should really phrase it that way. That's how Trump phrased it. He gave more aggressive language. I think the most constructive way to phrase it is that they believe that healthy women should be able to abort healthy, viable fetuses. Because if you start saying up until the moment of birth, people are like, oh, that's not true. That wouldn't happen. That's so people. It just is a distraction. So I recommend people just phrase it this way: that Democrats support healthy women aborting healthy, viable fetuses, because that is factually true. That's factually true. It'll save you a lot of time. It will. Um, and people are really also zoning in on this idea of basically you got to sacrifice on this issue to win elections. So we didn't know how far it was going to go. We didn't know how far it was going to go. So it didn't go as far as I anticipated, which I'm glad. But I think he zoned in on other things that I thought were unnecessary. So we shall get to that. And there's a lot of good statements from folks about it. But let's go ahead and watch the whole thing together.
Under my leadership, the Republican Party will always support the creation of strong, thriving, and healthy American families. We want to make it easier for mothers and families to have babies, not harder. That includes supporting the availability of fertility treatments like IVF in every state in America. Like the overwhelming majority of Americans, including the vast majority of Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and pro-life Americans, I strongly support the availability of IVF for couples who are trying to have a precious baby. What could be more beautiful or better than that? Today, I'm pleased that the Alabama legislature has acted very quickly and passed legislation that preserves the availability of IVF in Alabama. They really did a great and fast job. The Republican Party should always be on the side of the miracle of life and the side of mothers, father, their beautiful babies, and that's what we are. IVF is an important part of that, and our great Republican Party will always be with you in your quest for the ultimate joy in life. Many people have asked me.
Okay, so we'll pause right there because the IVF portion was, a good chunk of it, of the statement here. And so I I thought, because Michael Knowles said, "Oh, I thought it was, a decent statement or something." And I was like, Michael, he did not need to simp for IVF. And I know IVF is a contentious topic because there's a lot of families that have used IVF, and their precious human beings are walking around having their own lives, creating more life, because of this process. Um, but the pitch here from Trump and the folks who are fighting in the position that this should be something that Republicans push is that it's just good to be pro family. And the more this IVF debate comes up, it makes me kind of chuckle about the accusation that pro life people are pro birth. Because I'll tell people when they say, "You're just pro birth, you're not pro life," and I'll say, "That's if you're pregnant, you're going to give birth. The babe, like the birth is just exiting out of the cuckoo, right?" So so if you have an abortion, that's a forced birth, right? I'm not pro. When you say pro birth, to me that sounds like I just want babies born at any cost. And I don't think everyone should have babies. I think people should make families in the context of a united family of a man and a woman get married and they have a baby. That doesn't mean that if you are a single mom that your child is bad or you are bad. That's just not, you know, um the ideal, I would say. Or does it mean that if you've adopted or something that's a bad thing? That's a situation where I don't know, all kinds of things could arise where a child's parents have died, or someone gave them up for adoption because they didn't feel they could raise them, and you're trying to restore a situation where a child doesn't have that love and affection, and hopefully you can bring a family together in that sort of sense. So I understand that the traditional way that you would think of a family isn't the only way to have a family, but I don't think that babies at any cost is the way to go. Like I don't look at like a sea of people with no fathers and like that's a good thing for society. Like I'm glad people are here and life is a beautiful thing, but I would rather we do things in the correct way. The way that, you guys know I'm a Christian, the moral sort of God ordered design sort of way. So I'm definitely not pro birth. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, I don't think you should have kids. Like you're going and kind of living your life all sort of crazy. Like no, I think you should practice self-control and not be getting pregnant. That's what I think. I don't think you should just be like, "Oh, it's just put them on the farm and let them breed." That's definitely not my opinion. So when people talk about the cost of IVF, which Matt, not Matt, but Michael Knowles did a post, and he's like, I understand the pain of not being able to have a child, um and that's one reason why people are so defensive about IVF. But he also said, I it's hard to still kind of justify because you're like, at what cost? And the cost, you were like, how many embryos were created during the time where you're trying to make the child? And then they analyzed the embryos to see which, one, that there's instances where people will do sex selection or also sorts of different things. I had a friend who used to actually work at a clinic, an IVF clinic and stuff. And what about a situation where they have too many embryos and they're not going to implant them all and they don't know what to do because they're just frozen in storage? If you are a pro life person and you believe the scientific fact, biological fact that a human being's life begins when that egg meets that sperm and it's fertilized and that new life is created, that's a life in the petri dish. That's a life in the freezer. So are you going to keep keeping them frozen forever? Are you going to find a way to find them a womb to grow into? And there's cases where you want to make sure you get a successful pregnancy, so women will have multiple eggs, inside of them, maybe one, maybe two, and then they'll have multiple babies. And something may happen where their body can't handle it, or you might have to have what they call fetal reduction. I think that's what it's called. And they'll have to abort, or the doctor will say to abort. And I talked about a story. I think I read it on the air with you guys one time about a woman who her and her husband decided to do IVF, and she implanted two eggs, and they're just kind of like, what are the odds that one will become a twin? And so she one became a twin, so she had three babies. And so the doctors were like, you have to end up aborting one. And so she's like, well, can you abort one of the twins? And they're like, and I don't know, the whole thing is horrific, because I know at that point she has to make a decision, but it's like, what, you want like a set of each, like this genetic one and that genetic one. So they're like, because how the twins are, you can't do that. If you kill one twin, then both are gonna die. So she made the decision to kill the single child, but one of the twins wasn't developing well enough, so she had to end up aborting the twin. And then uh I think they said one would like kind of reabsorb or something. And so but by the time it was all over, she ended up paying like $100,000, something crazy like that, between the IVF and the abortion. But she tried to kind of find comfort with folks later about what she had done and the whole process she went through. And she was kind of surprised when people are like, you killed your child, and yeah, people seem to have that reaction when you do that. But I question what kind of drugs what's doing to their bodies and to get them ready, and then you get to a situation like that, and it's terrible. And in that article where they talked about, well, I started after that article, I started reading other articles and about how doctors have done fetal reductions, killing like 9 babies in the womb, aborting that many or whatever. And some women will have the, implantation later, and they want one baby. They don't want 3, they don't want 2, you know? And I don't know if these drugs that they're taking, it just kind of makes it more likely that the eggs will split off or whatever, and make multiples. Now, some people are just like, they will implant however they make and will take. And if they have 8 kids, they have 8 kids. But there's some cases when the embryos, if they're not used, they'll be used for science and other things like that. So there is a darker nature to this all. I'm not saying it's there's not a more ethical way to do IVF, but in the US, it seems to have less restrictions and kind of be more like the wild wild west. uh and then there's a surrogate situation where I don't feel that it's like a child is comes into this world with a mom and a dad, and it's so weird to me for like 2 dads or something to deny their child having a mother. As a matter of fact, there was a viral video of these 2 dads, gay guys, who had did a video chat or something with a girl to talk to the egg donor. I don't know if it was the egg donor, or the womb carrier. I don't know if, but the little girl was just like end up saying, "I love you, mommy," but she didn't know her, and so people were like, "This is really really sick to deprive this child of this mom here to design a child to purposely not have a mother, you know." And so Michael Knowles said it was evil, and then Joe Biden's team, his like Dark Brandon account or whatever, was like, "Oh, Republicans are coming for surrogacy, and they say it's evil." And Michael's like, "Funny how you guys didn't show the video that I was replying to and talking about." So after this Alabama IVF situation, there was this panic on the right um, because of this. And you had people like Carrie Lake and other folks saying, well, I support no restrictions. You support no restrictions? So it doesn't matter how many embryos people make, how they store them, how many are reduced, if they're like given to science, destroyed during some kind of science project, like nothing matters. If they end up in your next vaccine, nothing matters. Just no restrictions at all on the IVF industry. And they felt pressure to do that because of the Alabama case. It's really important to note that I think the best way to handle the IVF situation with Alabama and their Supreme Court was literally just to explain what happened. To literally just explain what happened. And the Republicans did not have the courage to even do that. And Trump was leading the way on that. To just be like, "Oh, no, no restrictions. Oh." Why not just be a leader and explain how the Supreme Court made the correct decision? Because they did. They absolutely did. And I've talked about it quite a bit. Some of you have, been watching me for a while. You are probably familiar with the case, but anyone who doesn't, I will briefly explain it. There was an IVF clinic that is supposed to watch these embryos, have them secure, and they're supposed to be secure and monitored. And someone, a patient, wandered in to where they're stored and removed them and ended up accidentally dropping them. I think they kind of like accidentally kind of froze their hand or whatever, freeze burn or something, but they dropped the eggs. And it destroyed the embryos of 3 different sets of parents. So the 3 different sets of parents wanted to sue the clinic, and it wasn't criminal. No one was going to jail. They wanted to not criminally. They wanted to sue them for wrongful death. That's what they wanted. But the court ended up siding with the parents. But the clinic was like, you can't sue us for this because they're not children. They're not minors or whatever. You can't do that. But the court was like, okay, but this law, and again, it's a civil law, not a criminal law, has applied to embryos in the past. So the question is, can we just be like, oh, well, it's not in a womb, so we can just disregard it and be like, no, you can't sue them for this. And from the text of the law, they didn't see a reason to do that. They didn't address 14th Amendment issues. They didn't address equal protection, all that other kind of stuff. They didn't rewrite the criminal code. They didn't address those things. They addressed the law, said, "Oh, this has applied to embryos. If the legislature wants to rewrite stuff so it makes it clear that it excludes embryos, or the embryos, are only included if they're in a womb, like they can make that decision. But based on how the laws are, we have to read the law, and yes, we have no reason to exclude them. Therefore, yes, they can sue." And you know what? They didn't rule that the clinic lost the suit. That still had to be, hashed out in court. And maybe the parents would lose, because I thought the clinic actually made a good point, because they're like, well, you guys actually treated your children like property, because one of you was like, oh, if it's a certain amount of time, you can donate them to science and all kinds of other stuff. So just kind of let it be known, like, yeah, we dehumanize your kids in this way, and you are a willing participant. So don't come at us talking about wrongful death. But I think the clinic was obviously liable for this. I thought they had a good point. Don't get me wrong. But should they be liable for not protecting these embryos that were in their care, that people paid a lot of money to have extracted and created and stored there? Absolutely. Absolutely. And some people are like, well, what about the person who did it? If the clinic wants to go after the person for trespassing or something into that area, that's one thing. But the clinic, absolutely. And when I explain the case like that, most people are like, oh yeah, it makes sense that they should have been liable for that. But people were losing their minds because the clinics were like, oh, we can't function like this. We got shut down. If that ruling made people want to shut down their clinics because they're afraid of being sued for wrongful death based on how they treat the embryos that are supposed to be in their care, what should have happened should have been like alarm bells in your heads going, what exactly are they doing in these clinics that they are so terrified of this going on? What is going on that they're so terrified about this? So they did rush to pass something in Alabama, but from the deliberation, I think that it probably could end up being challenged in court. I'd have to go back and look at it. But my issue with all that is that Trump could have explained what was going on and people could have followed suit, but they were too they were moral cowards, and they did what was politically expedient, and I think created a worse problem. So here Trump is making it the Republican position that we just have to support IVF. And I understand right now that's a hard conversation to have. And many people haven't thought about kind of what might not be moral and more about IVF. It's a relatively new conversation to me, to be frank. It's just something I've, kind of thought about the past couple of years. So people are like, oh, 80% of people agree with IVF. That's probably a fact. That's probably a fact. It's probably a fact. Like a lot of Republicans have used IVF. Conservatives use IVF. Sure. From Stephen Crowder's court proceedings, someone reporting on it, they reported that the twins that they have were conceived of IVF. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So Meghan McCain, she was like, I know a lot of conservatives who use IVF. I don't doubt it. Because people want to have families, and I understand. I understand that. I desire to have a family, and I'm an unmarried woman in my 30s. Like, whether you're a couple and failing to conceive for whatever reason, or you're like, gosh, where's that, you're thinking about getting older and your clock or whatever's ticking. It can be very painful for people. So it's not that I don't have sympathy for people who want to use it. There's just some concerns there. And to immediately go to this, there should be no restrictions, isn't a good thing. So they're creating a future battle, a future war, for no reason. And people are like, no, they had to because they are cutting ads about it. Okay, they're still going to cut ads about it. They're going to say, we don't believe you. We don't believe the Republicans. We don't believe the pro-lifers. And you know why they're really not going to believe it? Because the pro-life major organizations like Live Action and etc. still talk badly about IVF and trash IVF. So there's still a very strong voice on the right about this topic. So it's not going to go away. And someone like kind of cursed me out online, like, you bleeping you. You've been losing for 50 years. I haven't been alive for 50 years, but and Trump comes along and it makes all these gains and you throw him aside. And I'm like, first of all, you don't need to have that kind of language with me in the first place. But the and I said there's an information gap. Like, a lot of people haven't really stopped and considered this topic, this subject. And you can throw your hands up and say, well, we just have to surrender for now because it's politically expedient. But at some point, someone has to have the conversation. At some point. Unless you just don't want anyone to make the point at all. And that could be with IVF or to the pro-life issue. Because people mean that with that too. Like, oh, it's just a political killer right now. Well, redefining, like, there's the Democrats are basically taking the full-on abortion lobby position about no sort of limitations. That's pretty mainstream for them. And the Republican position is supposed to be, hey, we're going to stand for life. There are pro-choice Republicans and there are pro-life Democrats. So you don't, it intermingles, but mostly being pro-choice is a Democrat position and being pro-life is a Republican position. If you look at the platforms and stuff, right? That's how it is. So if the right, the Republicans, aren't going to be the vehicle of fighting for life and they start moving over this way, it gets really difficult for the rest of the movement to push the rest of the country where they should be on protecting life if the major political party and the leaders there are basically, busting in their kneecaps when they're trying to run with the vision. So, I would have rather Trump have not made this statement, to be frank. And we've just listened to a minute of it. I would have him rather not have said anything because, again, people are still, I know he's trying to appeal to independence, but this stuff, I know it's so very important to a lot of people, a lot of women and etc. But there are so many other issues that will either move the needle where they're going to vote for Trump or not. Like the economy and the national security and foreign policy and all sorts of different things. The border, for example. I think the border is the biggest one. So I also think that I know that there are other things that Trump has done, that Trump has said, that has made him unappealing to a lot of people, despite some good policies that he had in his presidency, that are a far bigger detriment to him getting reelected than this issue. Just to be frank with you guys, to be honest with you guys. Like, I was thinking about the Crisis King conversation and Nick Fuentes, because he's like at the heart of, using Crisis King for like a political Christian nationalist. And I don't mean that in a way that the media tries to rope in a bunch of Christians together who, like, if you pray at a rally or something, like, it's a Christian nationalist. They're against abortion, Christian nationalists. I mean, like, Nick thinks that it's bad that Ben Shapiro is the face of Daily Wire because he won't see Christ is king, and Jesus is Christ is king, so Jesus needs to be king of America. So, and total sort of weirdness. And he's been at rallies and have said that he loves Hitler, and then his group of gropers bust out and chants of Christ is King. So I was thinking about that situation and how there's some people who are like defending him and trying to say that he was smeared about being anti-Semitic and all this other kind of stuff. And I'd have to go back and think like, gosh darn it, Trump had dinner with this man. Trump had dinner. That was probably the first like, oh, I'm so angry with you moment of like since him being, well, I was, not pleased with some of his actions during, after the election and stuff, but that was pure frustration. I'm like, this is crazy. Why are you having dinner with Nick Fuentes and Milo and Kanye? I don't know who set that up, but that was not a good look. It was not a good idea. But I could go down a list. But Trump has convinced himself that this is going to be the killer, and he has to nip this in the bud. And I don't think he can do that because I've seen the tweets from the Biden folks anyway. They're still like, oh, well, Trump is the person who got rid of Roe v. Wade. So they're not going to let him run for this issue regardless. So at the very least, there could be some moral courage and a far savvier way of dealing with this. But people tend to think that he made the correct call on the rest of what he said. So let's actually watch it.
What my position is on abortion and abortion rights, especially since I was proudly the person responsible for the ending of something that all legal scholars, both sides, wanted and, in fact, demanded be ended. Roe v. Wade. They wanted it ended. It must be remembered that the Democrats are the radical ones on this position because they support abortion up to and even beyond the 9th month. The concept of having an abortion in the later months and even execution after birth, and that's exactly what it is. The baby is born, the baby is executed after birth, is unacceptable, and almost everyone agrees with that. My view is now.
So Democrats are probably going to again not care about him saying that he's going to protect IVF. They're going to be like, oh, this is the guy who says he's proud of getting rid of Roe v. Wade. And they've said some other stuff, but we'll get to it when he actually mentions it. But him going in on it, they're talking about executing babies after birth. Excuse me. Now, I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. I know that there are there's stuff with like Northam when they had that law that they were passing where if the baby survives an abortion and not providing medical care. Actually, the Congress that had come in, they voted like every Democrat except one voted to not mandate medical care after babies survive abortion. And they had the wildest takes. Like there was a newly elected congressman from Michigan who was on the west side of the state. Her name is Hillary Slotkin maybe, but her name is Hillary or whatever. But she said, the scripture about I knew you in my mother's womb or something. She's like, yes, the mother's womb, not the government's womb. I'm like, how are you going to take that scripture and read it right now, apply it that way? And we're talking about a situation where the baby has escaped the womb. They're out of the womb. They survived the abortion. And they're like, it was in the mother's room, so we got to make sure you can let it die. It was such a bizarre take. But all the Democrats, except for I think one, no, maybe it was two, maybe one voted no, and I think maybe one abstained. And everyone else was like, yeah, we should not mandate that it be provided, this medical care. So there's definitely monstrous positions. And I'll have to look up what he means by after execute after birth. But if I don't know, Democrats are probably like, this man is crazy and exaggerating. And they're just going to roll their eyes and say that there's probably like a ton of fact check stuff about it, you know, saying that he's wrong on this issue. As I already said, and hopefully someone, I know people who have him on speed dial, so maybe I'll just shoot out a text or something and just be like, please start framing this conversation as the Democrats believe that healthy women, so they don't have a medical emergency, should have the right to abort healthy, viable fetuses. So we're talking about babies anywhere from like 20 to mostly like around 24 weeks and up. And they do advocate for that. There's no getting around that. The only way they'll try to get around that is to say, well, it's only like a small percentage of abortions that are done that. Like, but they also try to couple it with, but they only do it in very extreme situations, which isn't true. It's not true. So that cuts through the, it only happens in extreme situations to say, no, if the woman is healthy and the baby is healthy, they still think that a woman should be able to go to Colorado and have a 3-day procedure. I'm sorry, I think it's a 4-day procedure. And on day 1, they induce fetal demise. That is what they support. That's what the abortion lobby pushes. And not only do they push it, they want to keep pushing it to the point where this stuff is paid for by the taxpayers and stuff. So that's the way that you deal with that discussion. Just being like, they want to execute him. They want to execute him. Folks don't buy that. That seems too grotesque for people to accept. You have to, the reason why this conversation prevails so much is because people don't know the facts. There was a study some years ago about surveying scientists about when does life begin. And most of the biologists said at conception. Now they're still pro-choice because they still believe there's other reasons or whatever to abort, or it's not up to them, and they should be up to like a philosophical question or whatever. But also in that study, Americans believe that at life, that's when people should be protected. And when asked like, okay, well, who's best to determine when life begins, and they say biologists. So the biologists say that life starts at conception, but they don't want that to be on them. So when people say that, oh, we want to do it 24 weeks, they'll go because of consciousness, or they'll say heartbeat, or they say 15 weeks because they don't know embryology. They don't know how to develop the fetus is. They don't know those things. They haven't pondered them. Because they'll say the wildest stuff in these conversations. And I'm not saying there's not pro-choice people who haven't pondered, the stuff and don't still advocate that, that you should be able to abort, because they do. But most people are under the inclination that, when it is a life, you should protect it. The question is just, at what point are we considering that? The Democrats are like, no, it's in the woman's body. She should be able to kill it if she wants to, even if it's healthy, even if she's healthy, even if the reason is, I don't know, she just doesn't want it. Sex selection. When Obama was president, they tried to pass a ban on like sex selection abortions, and it failed. And Jake Tapper, he wasn't with CNN at the time. Maybe he was with NBC or ABC or something. And he asked the White House about it, and they're like, no, we agree with, that failing because it's still a woman's right to choose. So you have to phrase it with some real world stuff. When you give them this wiggle room to think you're just a crazy person making up scenarios that don't happen, they just dismiss you. So he's handling this all wrong. So that's what a lot of people probably zone in, this middle part where it's like they're executing the babies after birth. But let's keep going.
Now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both. And whatever they decide must be the law of the land. In this case, the law of the state. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. You must follow your heart, or in many cases, your religion or your faith. Do what's right for your family and do what's right for yourself. Do what's right for your children. Do what's right for our country and vote. So important to vote. At the end of the day, it's all about will of the people. That's where we are right now, and that's what we want, the will of the people.
So that is the pro-choice position. And I don't mean like so much like the radical like lobby or stuff pushing for stuff, but like overall in general, the pro-choice position is I may not be personally pro-life, but you do you. Follow your heart. So he's definitely not leading the way here in the pro-life movement. When people say the most pro-life president ever, at this point I don't think it's appropriate to really say that. Now, I'm glad that he's not trying to push a 15-week ban to federalize that, and people would say, "Oh, well, we'll stop the very late abortions." Again, that would still his position would still allow like 95% of abortions to occur, if not more. But and another thing, if you're just like, okay, we'll sacrifice the 5% or whatever for electoral victory. I don't think that really makes you so much better than the Democrats who want to have them up into the moment of birth, as they put it. It's still a lot of babies, going down hard and brutally. So he says it's up to the states. Some Lila Rose said that he was unsure about his convictions on the Florida bill. I haven't found anything about that. I'll have to keep looking because I hadn't heard about that until she wrote a post about her overall thoughts of it. I really would like him to come out in strong support of the 6-week ban, and I in Florida. And I know he's said it was horrible that DeSantis did it before, but I'm 100% think that he probably has no idea about what all the exceptions are in that particular bill. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. So I did a post about it and mentioned that it has rape, incest, life of the mother, human trafficking, um, like severe bodily injury, and like a fatal fetal diagnosis. So a lot of exceptions there, and it's just protected at 6 weeks. And so some people push back on TikTok where I post the video, and they're like, "Well, that's not enough time." I'm like, "You're totally missing the point. The point isn't to give you more time. Like the exceptions that they have is about moral consideration to the mother. Like they shouldn't have to. The baby's going to die, or they believe the baby's going to die, and to not have to carry the baby and the grief of what that might do. Like there's you can debate about whether these exceptions are good or not, but um there's circumstances outside of her control, and you want to be compassionate as possible, right? But when you get to the point of like, well, they just didn't know that they were pregnant and they need some more time, and some people said it should be 8 weeks, and someone today told me it should be 12 weeks. And I'm like, why? You just want to give them more time to electively abort for any reason whatsoever. And is that really the ethic you want to push? Like just give them as much time as possible to make the decision. You might as well just have no restrictions on it at all, because some women don't know that they're pregnant until later, and maybe they're like, okay, I want to have this baby, but then something happens later down the line, like maybe their finances get screwed up. Well, maybe if their finance, like, so say they lost their job, if they had lost their job at 5 weeks pregnant, they would have got an abortion, but they had their job, but they didn't lose a job until it was like 18 weeks. So it's the same reason. So are you okay or not okay with them killing that same person for the same reason. So there's just I think if we're gonna make compromises or rules around restrictions, they should be about reasons and not really about gestation because there's really not consistency there. There's really not. So I want him to come out strong for that, and I want Republicans to fight hard for that. I don't know what he's going to do. Um, I would gauge that he's probably I would assume he's probably not going to come out hard for that, um, or even soft for it. I think he's going to just try to avoid it because he's really trying to save his election, and I get it, but he's got so many other issues going on. It's just not fair to pin it on the pro-life crowd. And you can say, well, there's these um ballot initiatives that people had. Yeah, and people were outspent, people were lied to, people were, you know, the pro-life movement had some bad messaging too, you know, it, there's all kinds of reasons why that stuff failed. I've talked about it a lot, like the Michigan one, and I don't feel like the Ohio one. They probably really had that stuff together too. I think DeSantis will probably have a better chance at success, even though it was more like a moderate state. And I would assume that overall they're probably, I don't know if they're more pro-choice than Ohio. I would assume they're probably more pro-choice than Ohio, but they have a higher threshold to have to get through to pass it. So I think they have a better chance at success. But again, what they have has a lot of exceptions. It doesn't make sense to not support that unless you just believe women should be able to abort for any reason. And so I would like, it has exceptions. Trump says what we need to support. It has those exceptions. Anyway, let's keep going.
I want to thank the six justices: Chief Justice John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Neil Gorsuch, incredible people, for having the courage to allow this long-term, hard-fought battle to finally end. This 50-year battle over Roe v. Wade took it out of the federal hands and brought it into the hearts, minds, and vote of the people in each state. It was really something. Now it's up to the states to do the right thing. Like Ronald Reagan, I am strongly in favor of exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. You must follow your heart of this issue, but remember, you must also win elections to restore our culture and, in fact, to save our country, which is currently and very sadly a nation in decline. Our nation needs help. It needs unity. It needs us all to work closely together. Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, everyone, we have to work together. We have to bring our nation back from the brink, and that's where it is. It's at the brink, and we will. We will do it. I promise you, we will do it. Always go by your heart, but we must win. We have to win. We are a failing nation, but we can be a failing nation no longer. We will make our nation great. We will make our nation greater than ever before. Thank you very much. Under my leadership.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to replay it. So, the exceptions for the rape, incest, life of the mother, those are things that have been in the platform. Those are things that have been Reagan, platform stuff. Which, by the way, in the midterms, he did endorse candidates who did not support those exceptions. So again, there's a lot of finger pointing, and none of them are at him. um, I don't think that emotionally they make a lot of sense to people. Morally, they don't. Especially if your ethic is that it's wrong to kill babies. Life of the mother makes sense. Though that rarely really happens, because in most emergencies that you run into with your life on the line, you're going to want to induce a labor because abortion will take, especially if it's later in the pregnancy, multiple days, and you may need that baby out of you fast. Right. So, no, I'm not gonna say that it never happens. Some people are like it never happens. I'm not gonna go to that absolute or whatever. I kind of think the ethic of if your life is in danger and you need to induce a labor or something, you like earlier, and you know that the baby's not going to survive, or you need to take some kind of medicine, and you know that the baby's not going to survive or something. I Preserving your life is still, I guess in that situation is kind of more like a self-defense kind of situation. I think most parents would be like, we're going to test the limit and really, try to save the child's life. Um, but to be like, now you can't just have that exception. I think it's worth granting. I do think it's worth granting. As far as, and by the way, every pro-life law in the country has that exception. Every law. The only states where you don't need that law is where there's no restrictions anyway. But every pro-life law on the books has that exception. As far as rape and incest, the question is, if it's wrong to kill babies, why is it okay to kill these babies? If that's the life needs to be protected, if it's wrong to kill babies, why is it okay to discriminate against these babies and kill these babies? And people on the pro-choice side are far savvier than some people give them credit for. And I've seen Destiny ask this question of people. They're like, "Oh yeah, rape exception." He's like, "Why? You said it's wrong to kill babies." I'm like, "Well, that's hard." And he's like, "Why should it be hard? You say it's wrong to kill babies." So they realize that there's an inconsistency there. So I don't know what the heck Trump would say if someone was on a debate stage with him and questioned him on that. So Republicans can keep having that exception, but I think one day someone will probably make you look stupid because you don't have a consistent standard of actually protecting human life. And women in that circumstance need all the help and the support possible. But I do think society does them a disservice when we treat these human beings as if they are stains that need to be removed, and forget that they are human beings. We just handle this particular exception or topic not well at all. Not well at all. But this idea that we have to, well, the kick it back to the states is, people are like, this is the correct position to kick it back to the states. We need to do that. And that's what we fought for, to kick it back to the states. And that will give him the most kind of political cover, etc. I am glad to know that he's not going to push a 15-week or 20-week ban. I'm glad to know. That is good information, because I was concerned that was the announcement. So I am glad about that. Um, Overall, this idea that it was going to be kicked to the states, which is the thing that a lot of people on the right were saying, it needs to be a states' rights issue. My response to that is, slavery was once a states' rights issue. Some things are human rights violations, and people deserve equal protection. And we should not be like, oh, you get to kill your kids here and not kill your kids there. There's an issue there. And when I say equal protection, like that, you can't deprive someone of their rights, including life, well, without due process, right? And people say, oh, but that just applies to people who are born. No, you're reading the 14th Amendment wrong. You're reading the 14th Amendment wrong, because if you think it only like applies to like citizens, then, because there's a citizenship part of the 14th Amendment, but you'd have to believe that the life part doesn't apply to the if it only applies to citizens, do you think that all the migrants who are coming over here can just be murdered without any sort of repercussions? No, you don't. So I would argue that the bones are there to be able to get rid of abortion. Do I think that we're kind of there now to do that? No, I don't. But I don't think people like Trump are actually helping. He said we need to win in order to save the culture. But what are we preserving as we win the elections? When we again kneecap ourselves, when we try to run with the vision. When you're like, oh, we got to throw this position away. To throw this position away, what are you fighting for? Bump stock bans and amnesty, things that Trump has said he was going to do. Take the guns and then due process. That was Trump. Now Trump will say some wild things, and usually someone from the NRA or I don't know, the Federal Society or somebody will be like, "Bro, you need to walk that back," and they readjust. So if Trump said something crazy, I'd be like, "Give it a couple days," and then he'd readjust. But he's had some inklings of, oh gosh, this is where the wind is blowing. Let me kind of follow the crowd here, and that's what he's doing here. And maybe that's kind of his conviction. I don't know. He used to be a pro-choice Democrat, and then he said he's pro-life, and I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for the appointment of the justices, and that he picked folks off the list that the Federalist Society gave him, and it led to Roe v. Wade being overturned. But now we do have to fight state to state. That is the truth. But I don't think we should give up on the idea that it can be banned outright in the U.S. But that will take some time. Um, but I question if how we've been fighting um, has been the delay. I question if that's part of why it's taken so long. And maybe 50 years isn't really that long, in the span of a nation. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But we still have a fight ahead of us. But as far as being some kind of moral leader on this issue, it's not Trump. It's not Trump. And I understand him wanting to win. I understand a lot of people want to put this issue aside. But if he had been like, no, we're going to do a 20-week abortion ban and allow it up until like 15 weeks or 20 weeks or something, I would have been telling you guys today I'm not voting for this man. And you'd be like, that's crazy. There's all this stuff going on. Yep. And um there's people who are weighing their pros and cons with Trump who don't want to support him. And the big question, and I'm not saying I'm asking it here, but what I'm still noticing from folks, some people have gotten over it and they're like, oh gosh, Biden is so terrible. You got to vote for Trump. But some people still on the fence. I'm not talking about never Trumpers who make their living off being a never Trumper, but folks are observing and they're thinking in the long term, will it be good for him to be the face and be the head of all this stuff when we start kind of cutting down things that are supposed to be really important, and they restructure the conservative party, the Republican Party, and you get some of these, I don't know, folks like Lauren Boebert getting felt up at the movie theaters as her representatives and stuff. Like in the long term, are those good things if it's going to be bad for the Republican Party? Can we last another 4 years? And I came to the conclusion with Biden, um, especially with the border, like I don't know. It's so bad. He's so bad. Foreign policy, border, economics. He's all for he just has an authoritative approach with so many different things. He talks about Trump being a threat to democracy, but he's the one who's, kept people. Well, I guess Trump, they did lockdowns and stuff under him, but he extended it way farther than he needed to go. And I will never forget the drama and the pressure of wondering about my sister's job over the vaccine that they knew didn't stop the spread. That was so crazy. There's so many reasons to not support Joe Biden, and um he can't be president again. So there's a lot of people who feel like they're voting very firmly against Biden, and but like Ben very firmly voting against Biden. Now he has reasons to support Trump and stuff, but I am concerned about the squishiness on these topics and how it'll impact the future of the Republican Party and the conservative movement and so on. And some of the company he keeps, I'm still annoyed, like that he praises Laura Loomer, and who implied that Casey DeSantis was exaggerating her cancer and all kinds of different stuff. So I'm praying for the man. Let's just end it with that. But is he pro-life? I don't really think that's kind of fair to say right now. I let me very quickly read um the statement from um Lila Rose. Maybe I retweeted it. I know I saved it, but maybe I retweeted it. So she really went in on him. So she said, my statement, it's a long one. Killing babies is always wrong. President Trump is not a pro life candidate. He's far less pro abortion than Biden, but he supports killing some preborn children and will even make that his position in an attempt to get pro abortion votes. Mario Cuomo was infamous for popularizing the framework of being personally pro life but politically pro choice. Former President Trump has taken this one step further by refusing to acknowledge the federal government's role in protecting life and by saying it should be left only to the states, while also saying he is undecided on how he will vote in November's abortion ballot question in Florida, which would allow the killing of children via abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. Now, I don't know if that's true. I would assume Lila is not making that up. I have not found that quote yet. I did look it up, to try to find it before the show, and it didn't like kind of pop up at me, and I would assume that would be kind of a big kind of article or something. So I will dig deeper on that. I just want to put that kind of caveat there, because if he's like, I'm undecided, I don't know if I'm going to vote for that, when it's like 6 weeks with all those exceptions versus, basically allowing it up to, 24 weeks or so and still having exceptions after that, that's terrible if you don't know which way you're going to vote. And that really upset me. It would really upset me. Okay. President Trump tells voters to follow their heart on the issue, yet he doesn't know how he plans to vote in his own community. Is his heart so dark that he doesn't even know whether he himself plans to vote on the question of legality of violently killing innocent children? That is appalling. President Trump also says that abortion should come down to the will of the people. It is not right for the democratic societies to vote on the fundamental rights of unpopular minorities. This is no more unpopular minority today than the preborn Americans. Abortion is not. Oh gosh, sorry, thought someone was on my arm. Um, Abortion is not about the will of the people. It's about respecting the human right that we are endowed with by our creator. Our rights come from God, not the government. Those rights do not change because of the circumstances of our conception. Children conceived in rape do not deserve to be killed. Children conceived in IVF do not deserve to be killed, frozen indefinitely, or subjected to lethal science experiments. President Trump's position also stands in opposition with the GOP platform, which has for decades advanced the idea that the government has a vigorous role in protecting children from abortion. The most recent GOP platform reads, the Constitution's guarantee that no one can be deprived of life, liberty, or property deliberately echoes the Declaration of Independence proclamation that all are endowed by their Creator with the unalienable right to life. Accordingly, we assert the sanctity of human life and affirm that the unborn child has a fundamental right to life which cannot be infringed. We support a human life amendment to the Constitution and legislation to make clear that the 14th Amendment's protections apply to children before birth. That position represents the views of the vast majority of the Republican voters and supporters of former President Trump. It is tragic that President Trump is abandoning his long-held Republican position. President Trump's new position is not leadership. It's a stab in the back against his supporters. With a leader like this, the GOP has little hope for making meaningful progress to protect preborn children. President Trump's mistake will also make it more challenging for the pro-life movement to win statewide referendums. Human life begins at fertilization, and this is the true pro-life position. Human life deserves protection from the moment life begins. The pro-life movement across our nation is strong and growing. I implore President Trump to reject this swamp consultant-driven position to abandon families and children at the risk of abortion. In 2016, President Trump won on the back of vigorous pro life support, and that support was vindicated with the appointment of the justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. But that support will not materialize in 2024 if President Trump holds to this anti human and cowardly position. Over 2,500 children are killed in our nation every day. They deserve legal protection, and our moment demands a champion who is not afraid to fight for them. So strong words there from Lila Rose. Lila Rose is the head of Live Action, which is a big pro-life organization. So this is really an appeal, I guess, to independents. Be like, I'm cool, guys. I do think it's important for him to say, like, hey, I'm not doing a 15-week thing or 18-week or 20-week or whatever, but he shouldn't have been like kind of floating that in the air anyway all this time. But there's a lot of evangelicals who don't vote. Excuse me, for all the talk of like the left being, concerned about conservatives voting. The truth is that there's a lot of votes that are left on the table, and there's folks like Charlie Kirk, like, you shouldn't vote Democrat. There's no reason to vote Democrat. You can't be a Christian and vote Democrat, which I don't say stuff like that, but they want to go that route, and you want to inspire them to go out and vote for the Republican candidate who you believe is going to advance more, religious, godly minded policies. And I think that's kind of hard to do if you're going to be squishy on this issue. Now, I don't think he should be all like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this and that federally. But I think he needs to be more affirming than this. And when you get in, you could at least do things like make it so that the abortion pill, like, you have to have an appointment before you have it. Just stuff like that. Like, it's, like, you have to have an ultrasound or something, because there's even complications where even if you have an ectopic pregnancy or something and you take the pill, like, it could be just bad for you. So there's or you might not know how far along you are. So people being able to go to like Walgreens or wherever they have them over the counter, I don't know which stores, but is not great. So even if you like try to limit it in that kind of way, how that even that would probably be hard to pass. But what's the harm in trying that? And that's an issue for when you get back in office. But I don't know if he would or wouldn't do something like that. Now, Trump is far better on the issue than Biden, no question. But I don't think that really inspires the evangelicals to get out of bed and be like, yep, we're going to go with the less bad option. So it's, in order to get those independents, he probably just thinks like, oh, those evangelicals will vote for me anyway. Cause they did in the primaries in Iowa. It was a blowout, right? It was a blowout. So I guess he figures at the end of the day that, he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and people will still vote for him. But it's not just a matter of people needing to vote for you, though. With elections, you need people who are excited and are going to door knock and are going to mobilize people to get out the vote and then poll watch and other kind of stuff. So people need to be supportive of you as a candidate if you want to win. And this isn't inspiring stuff. And I don't care if that ticks you guys off. So anyway, we are over on the hour. So let me just briefly try to talk about the situation with this OnlyFans model. So Michael Knowles had a interview with Pearl Davis, and Pearl Davis, she believes that she doesn't want to tell men what to do. And she got kind of, testy when Michael Knowles was saying what men ought to do. And she even said something like, oh, well, it sounds like you think you're God. But Pearl will say things about women all day long. So Pearl is a woman hater. I don't like the term pick me. It's very much that way. Pearl says, I'm not selling people anything. I'm just telling them the truth. I believe that Pearl is selling victimhood to men. And I'm not saying that men haven't got a raw deal from society, from women, from the courts, and that different things aren't unfair to them. But she is selling perpetual victimhood to them, and the things that she pretty much prescribes, especially like on the war on marriage, which I talked about this on a stream, but I have an article you guys can go back and read on the website about it. Her sort of ideas, which Michael pointed out, just kind of lead to more hedonism. So she mentioned a couple times about OnlyFans, like the men shouldn't, like, can we just agree that men shouldn't date only former OnlyFans girls? And he's like, it's not ideal, but I do believe in redemption. And so she said that a few times. But I know that Pearl has constantly talked about um, purity, like leaders or whatever in the church who will encourage abstinence. They will encourage abstinence, but they'll have these women who were once ran through, so had a lot of sex back in the day, and they come to God and they've repented and they've changed and they're trying to encourage people to not do the same thing. But she has an issue with that because she sees it as just incentivizing bad behavior, like, oh, you can go and whore out and still have a good life later, and God will forgive you, and you can have a husband and a family, and but she believes that you should, basically your life should be kind of ruined because you did these things, and that'll teach them the lesson. And I can understand a bit of the practical wisdom in that, but the problem is that Pearl claims to be a Christian, and she does not appear to be so, because she's kind of forgetting that it's God's grace, not her grace. And it's not that we're applauding women for whatever. It's we're looking at what God has done in their lives to turn it around. And if God decides to pick you up, dust you off, clean you up, and rock you back and forth in his arms, and say, hey, you're a new creature. And by the way, you're not ruined. The world will call you broken, but I call you daughter. I call you daughter. And by the way, here's a godly man who will love you, and your life can be beautiful. There's power and redemption and love in Christ, and I don't want you to be broken pieces the rest of your life. That's not the kind of God I am. And to hear those testimonies, those stories of redemption, is a good thing. It's a good thing. It's just testimonies. It's the gospel. So Michael had mentioned, Pearl had mentioned an OnlyFans girl who she believed was tricking the right. And so Michael was confused and thought she meant another girl who left OnlyFans, he's been following her story and her conversion seemed genuine. So there was some confusion there on their conversation. So he just went and found the girl that Pro was talking about, invited her on, and she told her story. And it was kind of fascinating because she she got into OnlyFans during COVID, and she made like $9 million from the platform. She's into cosplaying and gaming and stuff. So she kind of sells a fantasy of being any kind of girl. And, dudes are into that stuff, right? So she did really well on there, but she comes from a background of being a preacher's kid. And so she talked about basically different church hurt that she had from church splitting, and also having to do a lot of tasks in the church, like choir. You had to be the greeter, you had to be this, you had to be that. And I'm like, yep, I had to do that. Yep, I had to do that. Yep, I had to do that. For folks who don't know, I'm a preacher's kid. Hi, hello there. And so a lot of things she was saying, I could relate to as far as having to do that. But what I couldn't relate to her with was the kind of brokenness that was appeared to be in her home. And we had people leave the church before, and um I guess you could, the split's not in the dramatic sense that she kind of described, but her parents were divorced. I think they got divorced prior to them really coming to Christ. And then they got remarried. And so her dad ended up becoming a pastor. And she didn't go into all the kind of drama that broke out. But as she was older, I guess she kind of was like, was some of this stuff really him? Was he the problem? And she's like, I love my parents, but um and now her parents are getting divorced again. So there's this, Michael pointed out, like, oh, so there's like divorce that's kind of happening in the church, with the churches splitting and stuff, and there's kind of dysfunction in the home a bit. And she also acted out as a young person because she wanted attention, and her dad didn't really like give her affection because he was just kind of like, I don't know, I'm a dad, I can't really hug you like that, which is foreign to me because my dad is way more affectionate than my mom. He's a hugger, and stuff. My mom, her love language is acts of service, and my I don't know if physical touch is my, maybe it is, but you know, so her experience and describing her life is, we have the similarity of growing up in the church as PKs, but I'm looking at it, listening to her, like, my parents understood the priority of family and the ministry, and that the family is a ministry. The family is a ministry as well. And it made my heart kind of broken for her to go through all the things that she's went through, and to not, I also be able to share in that experience of having a dad who had priorities together. And we had, folks that talked about us and hard times and hardships. Like, she talked about, she went through financial struggle and other things like that. We went through financial struggle, dealing with the church and all kinds of different things. So I would love to have a conversation with her. But it was a story that I could really relate to. And but as she got older, because she was acting out and got into the opportunity to do the OnlyFans stuff, she said she was the kind of person that has to learn the hard way, and I know folks like that. So I'm like, dear, oh gosh. But like, once said one time, her mom, she didn't really communicate with her, and sent an email saying, this isn't what God has for you in your life. And so she was so annoyed by that, and she's like, this didn't really feel like love. I'm like, yes, that was, that was the most off thing that she probably said in the entire interview. I'm like, that was her mom, like, trying to tell her the truth, that was not what God wanted in your life. But you just didn't want to hear it because that, you know, she just has that rebellion in her heart, or had that rebellion in her heart. So, maybe she needs to reflect a little bit more on that, because I'm like, baby girl, she was probably trying to do the right thing by you when she sent that email. And she lost, she said she felt really numb doing OnlyFans, and how she described it, um Michael and other people found it fascinating that she was kind of becoming kind of sociopathic, maybe to a degree. And now the sort of emotions that she was lacking have been revived as she's found identity in Christ. And which I said, if he finds that interesting, he needs to interview David Wood. He really needs to interview David Wood. If you haven't looked up David Wood's testimony, I very much encourage you guys to do that. It's so fascinating. And but you can find it on YouTube, his testimony. He filmed like maybe a 30-minute video where he's like walking, it's black and white, and he's going through subway and other stuff like that. It's such a great story. It's one of the most incredible testimonies I've ever heard. But he was like a sociopath. I guess technically kind of still is, but the Lord does mysterious things in us and saves us. So she had a really interesting story, and it made me really, I'm very thankful to God for her life and her testimony. And she wants to get other people out of it, like doing OnlyFans. She wants to encourage women to not go into it, to help them find other ways to be successful online or make money, because people still want to make money, and not feel like they have to go that sort of route. And I can see like the ways that the wrong turn she was making in her life that led her to the path that she was on, like probably also like not being able to have finances because of things in the church, going on and then feeling like I'm going to do whatever it takes to make all this kind of money. Um, but she didn't go into really deep detail, but one of the guys that she was with was someone she worked with, and he did gay stuff for OnlyFans too, because he's an OnlyFans person, and a lot of the guys who are on it, they don't make as much as the women, but they do like gay content or whatever. But and sometimes they do stuff with the women. But he was older than her. She was like early 20s. He was in his 30s, 30, and he introduced her to a lot of dark, kind of perverted things. And she said the relationship was really toxic, and so she just didn't date after a while for a couple years, I think, after him. And then she found her husband on TikTok, and her husband was they had a friendship that developed, but he was telling her stuff like, I'm praying for you, I'm praying for you, I'm praying for you. And one day they went to church, and she ended up feeling like she should get baptized, and she got baptized. And her whittling away from OnlyFans and stuff didn't happen like immediately, because one, you can't just delete your stuff where people are subscribed to it anyway. But the spirit had to convict her to get rid of that stuff. So it's gone. Pearl Davis is still talking about her, but it's gone. And a lot of folks are upset about some of the comments that she's been making, and I just want to read a few. I'm gonna go through like two tweets. I don't have them saved on uh Twitter anywhere, so I'm just gonna have to read it to you. But actually, my sister sent me this. Pearl Davis said, "You know what's funny? I rarely drink, don't smoke, don't party, and yet tradcon women tell me I'm not a real Christian while simultaneously defending an ex OnlyFans whore." Laughing, crying face, laughing, crying face. And I don't see any love of the gospel from Pearl. Again, she does things that encourage degeneracy while not even having the courage to say that men ought to do good, but she will condemn women even when they change, and has a problem with how God decides to bless their lives. And I don't know why it's so personal for her. But that's at least why I think that she's probably not a Christian, because she doesn't seem to love the gospel and the good news and what God can do in people's lives. And so someone replied to her and said, Luke 5:31-32, Jesus answered and said to them, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick, I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And they said, read the parable of the prodigal son. And she said, I hate that parable. Now, if you are a so-called Christian, but you hate the parable of the prodigal son, there's lots of things wrong. Lots of things have gone wrong, and you need to reevaluate your life. But the prodigal son story, there was a father with two sons, and one of them was like, give me my inheritance. I'm going to go do my own thing, which is kind of like saying, because you get your inheritance after your parent dies. It's kind of like saying, you're dead to me or whatever. I want my stuff. And he went to go live his life, blew it on a bunch of inappropriate things or whatever, and got to the point where he was just solo and destitute, and was like, you know what? It doesn't make sense for me to even be out here starving, because even the servants or whatever will live better in my father's house. And so he decided to come back all humble and be like, and just work for his dad and whatever. But when he like came back home, his dad was like there to greet him with arms wide open, and it was like, hey, we're gonna have a feast and etc. Blah blah blah. Now the other son was just I think it's kind of funny because you can kind of see things from his perspective, like, what the heck's going on? Because he's like still in the field. Like no one was like, hey, your brother's home. Like, stop working, let's go party. He's just like, what the heck is going on? So he complains to his dad, and he's just like, hey, you never like killed the calf and did all this stuff for me. And so his dad was like, all that I have is yours. Like, you just have to ask or whatever. Like, all that I have is yours. So there's a lesson for, there's all sorts of lessons and sermons from the prodigal son, but this is all told in like a series of different stuff about the lost person finding their way back and rejoicing. Like there's a parable of the lost sheep, of the person who goes to go find the one sheep to bring them back in and stuff. So and we need to be happy about when people come and reconcile with Christ, not all like, oh my gosh, they're the worst person. Like, no, be happy. And maybe she's conning people. I don't, get that sense, but maybe she is, maybe she's not. But that'll be for God to judge, and for her to have to suffer with one day, if she doesn't repent of that, if she's running a game or whatever. But um she's gonna it's a relationship. Like, people have there's a tradition where you get saved and you go up to the altar for the altar call and you say the sinner's prayer, and then it's like, oh, you're saved. um we were in revival sometime last year, and the pastor who came to preach for our church, he's like, I don't really he's like, what you're really doing is inviting yourself into a relationship with the Lord. It takes some time to work some stuff out. So I think we should pray for her, and we should pray for Pearl. Um we should, and I do, and I will. I also think it's important to rebuke when necessary. So that's why she's getting a rebuke. So another thing she tweeted. Um, so my sister sent me the prodigal son. I hate that tweet. And so I sent her this one in return. She said the difference between a former drug dealer preaching and a former porn star is that a drug dealer had to go to jail to pay some sort of retribution, where the porn star simply has to say sorry and can build a brand off being a former prostitute. So, one, the different crime, the OnlyFans person or the porn star, there's a different legality there. I don't know if I've ever heard Pearl say that this stuff should be criminalized. The people who watch it and the people who should do it should go to jail. If that's her contention, that she believes there should be that kind of societal retribution, I haven't heard her say it. But it doesn't seem like that's something she's passionate about. So the I don't really think they're comparable in that sense. But the reality is that not all people who do crimes go to jail, and not all former people who do drugs or sell drugs go to jail. And some of them reform and do preach, or at least testify about the goodness of God and what God delivered them from. And I know people who have been in such circumstances. I know people who were on drugs, sold drugs, and delivered, and preach great sermons, and you would never know that they had that kind of background in their lifestyle. Just genuinely amazing people. And I know someone, their husband was into selling drugs and stuff, and in a time before she got saved, the Lord would still give her dreams and stuff. And so right before, like, the police were ready to raid them, she had a dream about them going to jail and stuff, and she was like, who's going to raise my baby and stuff. And so she also had another dream to go to this community, to talk to somebody who happened to go to this community meeting where they were talking about different raids or something. Which I don't know why they pre kind of planned this and let the folks know in the community. But they're like, it kind of seems like you guys might be in danger or whatever. So anyway, she got her life together, and really gave her life to God before it was too late. So I'm not saying that God isn't a God of justice and that people shouldn't be paying retribution and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, if God's doing a work in people, you just need to get over it. Again, it's God's grace, not your grace. I don't know if you guys can hear these dogs next door, but they're going crazy. It's God's grace, not your grace. So I don't understand the anger that Pearl has and the judgment that she has. Yes, you can't hear the puppy. I do not have a puppy. Those are my neighbor's puppy dogs. They usually go crazy about this time if I'm going late, and I am about to hit like 6 o'clock. So yeah, those are they're running around, so they're quite loud. So I'm sorry about that. But I don't understand the issues that Pearl have. Inspiring philosophy, um, which if you're unfamiliar with inspiring philosophy, they do a lot of great stuff. I think I retweeted him talking about Pearl, or I at least liked it. Um, Let me see if I can find it really quick. Yeah, and Pearl did another video talking about the girl and about how she had an account or something still up, and she got community noted. She's like, she raised her prices, and the community note said that she didn't raise her price of her OnlyFans, which has been completely deleted. She also explained the short delay in deleting the page following her conversion to Christianity was not due to her, but OnlyFans policies. So Pearl's still pushing like the narrative really hard. And so, Inspiring Philosophy said Pearl, said she needed to keep her OnlyFans up for tax reasons, and OnlyFans would not let her delete it right away. A month ago, she deleted all her content on there when she felt convicted by the Holy Spirit. If you check now, her OnlyFans page is down. She said in the interview with Michael Knowles, she got rid of a lot of luxury items like her Porsche. You have admitted you didn't watch the whole interviews, and so you don't have all the facts. You think she needs to go away for 5 years? Maybe you should apply that rule to yourself. Perhaps you should wait 5 years and see what she does before you start judging and shaming her. You are not perfect either, and yet you constantly throw stones. God has always had a habit of choosing the weak to lead the strong. He chooses the least likely person to work through, not the most qualified. Nala may be another example of that. So perhaps you need to shut up and let God work. Your mentality is that when someone newly comes to Christ, we should not celebrate and rejoice, but shame them and judge them because they might make us look bad. Who cares what the world thinks? We are not supposed to care what the world thinks of us, but only what God thinks of us. And God is rejoicing over her. Have you not read the scripture? Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. If anyone is making us look bad at this point, it's not Nala, it's you. Jesus said, those who are well. Okay, someone already used that scripture, so I'm not going to reread it. But Nala was lost and now is found, and all you do is complain and attack. Do you truly have Christ in you, or are you another whitewashed tomb? So I I mean, Pearl grew up, I guess. She went to like Catholic school, I think, and she still identifies as Catholic. But and I think maybe she will go to church every so often. But you know, um, by their fruits, and the fruit ain't fruiting here, guys. um, if I would say that Nala seems far more on the up and up as far as their walk than her. Now, I do have a bit of a concern with newly Christian influencers, um because I don't know what they might say, or because of different stumbling blocks or hiccups that they might have in the public eye while so many folks are looking at them. um she seemed to have a pretty good grasp on scriptures and other stuff, probably because she was a PK and taught Sunday school and all kinds of different stuff. So she had a heart problem, and that needed to be reevaluated and stuff. And so she's come to Christ. So she sinned openly, and she has repented openly, and now she's praising God openly, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. So time will tell. Time will tell. Yeah, the fruit ain't fruiting. I'm glad you like that line. It's just not. It's just not. Anyway, I have a I guess I might not put out today, maybe I'll put out tomorrow, about some of the stuff that Pearl said to Michael Knowles, and other stuff that we've covered with Pearl, to kind of break down like her thought process and stuff. Because some people are pushing back, like, "Why are you guys defending a prostitute or Knowles so much?" I'm like, it's not even about that. Because Pearl brings the same energy to non OnlyFans girls. She brings the same energy and the same judgment to the same women who have turned their lives around, who are telling people to not make the same mistakes, but she just thinks that they should be broken goods. And that's not right. Anyway, I'm going to let you go before these dogs go super crazy. And we are way over time anyway. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please go to blacktnews.com slash just go to blacktnews.com. You guys can check out different merch, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at the website, because it does cost to stream around my website, all that stuff. You guys can if you're watching this back later and you want to just donate by like super thanks or something, you guys can do that. But best way to do is just go to the website, and there's links in the descriptions to all my different kind of social media channels and my website. So thank you guys very much. And good to be back to talk to you guys after my little vacay. Again, I didn't quite finish my book, but I'm still really working on it to try to get it done. I only got like 3 hours sleep last night between me still trying to write and Trump's like the anticipation of his announcement. I'm like looking on Twitter and still writing. So I was up really late, and I'll be a little surprised if I'm not sick by the end of the day, because just as I got older, I cannot stay up and like live off of like limited sleep like I used to. I used to just have like, I don't know, 3-4 hours, and I just write until I passed out. And I just, I'm 30, so 34 to be more exact. So it's just not like how it used to be. It's just not how it used to be. But thank you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.